name's Romy. This is Castor, who's not asleep for once, but is about to have a church. And today I bring you a spoiler-free review of Lun Dun by China Mieville. So in January I picked 10 books off my bookshelf that I had been wanting to reread for years and years and years. And Lun Dun was the first of the 10 that I read. I first read this in, I think, 2011, and pretty much since that moment, since the moment I closed it, I have wanted to reread it. It was, and it remains with this reread, to be one of the most unusual and imaginative books I have ever read, and that is something I truly love about it. And when I turned the page last night when I finished it and closed the book, I immediately wanted to reread it, but this time it wasn't so much a favourite as it had originally been. Did I still love it? Well, I thoroughly enjoyed it. Did I still want to immediately reread it? Yes. Do I think it's one of the most unusual books I have ever read? And am I going to remember it as being one of the most unusual books I've ever read? Yes. But it definitely wasn't quite how I remembered it, which is not surprising because 2011 was 8 years ago. Gosh. I didn't have Castor 8 years ago. I had never dyed my hair 8 years ago, and I was a completely different person 8 years ago. So it's no wonder that my perspective and my way of enjoying books has changed in that time. There are a couple things about Lun Dun that stood out in my memory that I completely remembered. One of them was this character called Curdle, who, by the way, is my absolute favourite character. Curdle is a little milk carton. Curdle is just like a little puppy and follows one of the characters, Diva, around and loves her, and Curdle is just so sweet and so nice and just so, except not so, but like so, that I just absolutely fell for Curdle. Curdle is my favourite in the book. And there are a lot of really interesting characters in Lun Dun. I don't know if I should keep holding it, but I'll try this and see how my arm holds up. There are a lot of really interesting characters in Lun Dun, but not all of them have really exceptional, I didn't feel, character development. We have Diva, who has some pretty phenomenal character development. The Smog, who is our antagonist, they have some pretty interesting character development. Hemi, a half ghost boy, has some pretty good development, and that's about it. We get to know characters in a way that we know them better by the end than we did by the beginning, but not all of them are really developed. I really like the character Obade Fink, who creates clothes made of books and uses his head as a pincushion, but I didn't get to know him that well. He was just kind of another character. We have a fairly large and fairly kind of overturning cast of characters to follow, but I do wish I did get to know characters like Conductor Jones, who we do kind of get to know, but not as well as I wish we had, a little bit better, and characters like School, who kind of are just there. School is a mysterious character who walks around in a old-fashioned diving suit, and we don't really get a great insight to that character. They're there, they're super helpful, they're pretty nice, and that's about it. And I definitely want more from my characters and to just feel like they're there and they're nice. A few other things I remembered. I remembered the brilliance of Lun Dun, the way it was just mind-bogglingly wonderful. And that was something that I remembered as I read the book, but that, I'm getting rid of the book, but that redoubled. It was just layers upon layers of imagination, and it was just stunning. But sometimes it got to the point of feeling like it was almost too much. So everything is kind of almost too much, almost too confusing and complex, and it's a lot to get your mind around, and I loved it. I did. I absolutely love this world. I think it is one of the most interesting, fantastical places I have ever read about, and I would love to explore it more. I wish there were more books so I could explore it from different perspectives, different characters' points of view. But when you step into Lun Dun from a Londoner's perspective, so someone in the London that we know, Lun Dun is London flipped, and everything is completely different. So we're getting all these descriptions of all these differences, and it's just a little overwhelming, and I feel like I would have enjoyed it more if that was dialed back a little bit. So that was something that I struggled a little bit with. Something that I kind of had issues with was how many plot lines there are in this story. It kind of goes all over the place, and a part of me loves that. It's a very fast-paced book, but it's fast-paced to this one plot line, and then that ends, and then it's fast-paced to this one plot line, and then that kind of carries on and segments into a few other plot lines, and it is enjoyable. But what you think of as the main plot line, it starts pretty late in the book. It starts about halfway through, and by then I'm already invested in what was happening before. And while there's a big plot twist that I remembered and loved when I first read this, and I still think it is one of the most brilliant plot twists I have ever encountered, I also feel like there's a lot going on. There's a lot to keep track of and a lot to become newly invested in, and then figure out how you feel about all the other stuff that's not happening anymore. My favourite thing about Lun Dun is that it is just so otherworldly. It is incredible. It has ninja bins, and they are one of my favourite parts of the book. It has terrifying giraffes. It has characters who aren't what you think, and characters who seem to be what you think and then they change, which is kind of the same thing. It has houses that have jungles inside of them. It has mysteries upon mysteries, and I adore that about it. It has some really wonderful characters to follow. I really noticed this time how few female characters there were. We start the book with two main characters, Xana and Diva, two girls from London who cross over into Lun Dun, and I feel like we don't really get to know Xana that well for the role she plays in the book, and she and Diva really just have very ordinary feeling conversations. They don't really seem to click that much. Like, you can tell they're friends, but I also can't tell the level of their friendship. I feel like I missed out on a lot of really important conversations that could have happened between those girls. We also get to know a character a bit later on called Lecton. There is a slate runner who is a female who we get to meet for about a page, and then there's another female character who is mentioned a few times throughout the book, but that's about it. And that really was something that disappointed me. Sure, we have a main character who's a female, and she's strong and intelligent and vulnerable, and she says what she wants, and she is fantastic, and she's surrounded by like 6 guys for basically the entirety of the book, and her conversations are just with basically these guys, and they are wonderful. I love these characters, but all the adventurers that we hear of and we meet, they're all men, and that's something that I don't remember really noticing when I first read this, when I was a lot more impressionable, I guess, and it's something that I really noticed this time, and I wished there were more female characters. Continuing on the themes of diversity, queer characters are never mentioned, and this is something that I really strive to find in books, because being queer myself and wanting to pioneer like people being able to find books with characters they identify with in them is something, it's just something that's really important to me, and that's never mentioned. There are a few people in the book who I kind of feel like fit together as a couple, but it's never mentioned. When it comes to cultural diversity with the characters, Diva Resham mentioned a few times that she has dark skin compared to the lighter skin of people around her, but again, that's not something that is ever blatantly said. So there are a couple things I was disappointed in and a couple things I wished were different in Lun Dun, but there was one thing that, well, kind of a series of things that surprised me and that I didn't like, and that is how dark this book is. I am not a big fan of like creepy things in anything. I have a very low scare factor, and I could not believe that I got through this book in 2011 or whatever year I read it was, because it is really, really sodding creepy at times. There's descriptions of characters, beasts, things that happen that are pretty gross and pretty dark. There's quite a lot of death in the book that can be really hard-hitting and kind of makes you think a bit more than, oh, a character just died. It makes you think, oh, what happened to them? So there's also a lot of uncertainty around some of the deaths. There's the Smog, which is the antagonist, which is a really, really dark character and very malevolent feeling in a way that surprised me and unsettled me. And there's also some really kind of unsettling illustrations throughout the book, especially it seemed like every time there was something that I wasn't comfortable with, there'd be an illustration of it. So there were a lot of elements that kind of made me uncomfortable, and as I was reading each of these throughout the book, because it's kind of an ongoing theme, this darkness, this cruelness and malevolence, that every time I would read them, I think, gosh, I can't believe I didn't put the book down here, because if I had been reading this and I'd never read it before, if I'd been reading it now and I didn't know where it was going, or I didn't know how much I loved it and how important it was to me, I would have closed the book. It was just like that bit too dark for me at times, and that was something that I definitely wasn't a fan of, and I definitely didn't remember. So, Lun Dun. This book held a lot of surprises for me this time, but it was also very familiar. Lun Dun was not what I expected, and also in ways completely what I expected. I enjoyed it. At times I really, really enjoyed it, and I know I'm going to reread it again in a few years and I'll probably have a completely different experience. That is my first spoiler-free review of my YouTube channel and of 2019, so that's pretty great. And I'm sure I'll be back soon, because I really like just chatting away about a book I read. And I mean, all of the books that I've picked out, they're now over there, they're not in front of my window anymore. All of the books I've picked out I've read before. They're ones that are really close to my heart and I love them, so there's not going to be like many negative reviews in there, if any. But I would like to grab a few different books off my bookshelf and read them and review them and see what we come up with. Thank you so much for watching. If you know of any books that are kind of similar in the wondrousness of the world to Lun Dun, please recommend them, because I love reading. It felt so nice to be back in a world that was familiar but also dazzling in its imagination. And I would love any recommendations. That's bye from me, and bye from the sleepy puppy.